And now I would like to welcome our next speaker. And he's from Sámi. Let's welcome Rune. And he is a Sámi, grew up in the Sámi community. He engaged in Arctic and indigenous peoples issues already as a student. And in most of his professional career, he has been involved in policy planning and development as part of the Sámi parliament staff, also as an independent consultant in Jaruma as head of the Arctic and Environmental Unit in the Sámi Council, as Executive Secretary of the Arctic Council Indigenous Peoples Secretariat, and now he is back at the Sámi Parliament as Director General. And all of these positions have given him a thorough understanding of indigenous issues from different perspectives. So again, let's go back to Gonzali and we will have Rune with us.
Boris, Rune, glad to have you with us. And by the way, Jocelyn, you can run this whole show, by the way. Like you did it amazing just now with the segment with Hortencia. Sorry, sidetracking, going back to Rune. Boris, how are you doing and how are you handling COVID-19?
Boris Fallia, Thank you all for inviting me to this webinar. I think it's an interesting concept that due to COVID-19 might be developed into a channel of communication and discussions also when we cannot meet as we usually do. You ask about how the Sámi communities are coping with COVID-19. I think that is not a straight, easy answer to that I can give you, because we are separated in 4 different countries, and although we have self-governing structures, we do not have we don't even aim to provide the kind of basic health services and the kind of basic health assistance that would be necessary to manage the COVID-19 pandemic. So we have all in our respective countries been trying to follow and join in on the common policies that has been invoked in the different countries. Just to not, and just in that sense, made sure that there is information also in Sámi language so that it comes out to everybody, that is equal in that sense, but otherwise on measures and we haven't really had very strong issues there. That is until the lockdown extended into several months, and the differences between the countries began to create problems, because we have rivers dividing our nation in some parts of the Sámi area, where you have always had a common economy, a common interaction across borders, and that was basically stopped during the COVID-19 pandemic. So that, and when the spread of the virus was mainly down south in the populated areas, and we had almost the same spread situation up north, we couldn't see the rationale behind that. We couldn't meet our brothers and sisters on the other side of the border, whereas we could go to the capital where the spread was much heavier and much more difficult. So that the borders in our areas then became an obstacle that every now and then has been through history challenging to us. But now at least Norway and Finland is open, and but Sweden is another issue. There's still widespread also up north there. So we are careful, and we are a traveling people. We don't have the saying "home sweet home." We have the saying to be on the move is better than to stay still, and that, of course, is not very popular these days.
I think wherever your lavu is, that's where your home is. I would imagine.
Sure.
Thank you so much, Rune. Let me talk to you a little bit about your experiences at the international level. I think that's very. I think I want to highlight a couple of them. We started working together in the Alta process leading up to the World Conference. I keep reiterating that the Alta outcome document is an Indigenous plan of action of itself, and it goes beyond the World Conference. What stood out for you from that process, or any thoughts on the Alta outcome document?
Well, just first of all, a couple of I've heard some of the discussion here, and first of all, a couple of words about the
Sure.
initial idea of the Alta conference, because as we all remember, that was an initiative. The World Conference on Indigenous Peoples was an initiative that the states came up with in 2010 in December. That was basically an initiative to hold a World Conference in 2014. That wasn't really known in the Indigenous community why they would hold such a conference. And what was the ambition of the states that initiated it, and why the General Assembly even decided it. So we were a group of Indigenous, let me say, diplomats that started to talk. Especially, I would highlight our Asian colleagues and some of our also the Inuits and others that where we actually had to come together and decide how do we handle the fact that they are actually going to hold a big world conference without our involvement. So we had two alternatives. Either we just say that this is your process, we want to participate, or we could go all in and try to take over parts of that initiative and make it as a common, bigger Indigenous push. Because some of our concern at that point was that some states would use this World Conference to backtrack some of the achievements and pull back some of the achievements we had with the declaration and other areas where we had made progress. So that's part of the backdrop here. We made a concept paper. It was made by Leif Dunfjell and John Henriksen then in January 2011. And we circulated that concept paper among a couple of Indigenous organizations. And then we said, the Sámi Parliament of Norway decided that this is a good initiative, that we gather, we start a process where we actually go region-wise and try to gather for a big prep conference in Alta the year ahead of the World Conference, so that we could really make a common push towards the United Nations General Assembly. the Sámi Parliament in Norway took then an initial initiative to the Norwegian government just to say that, hey, would this be something that you want to collaborate with us on? We never asked for permission to hold that conference. We asked for collaboration, and that's in this whole self-determination and self-governing. We have to remember that we should think about the way we phrase ourselves in the dialogue with the states. Are we giving ourselves the status that we want? So we present it as a collaboration, not could you support us, or could we be allowed to hold such a conference? That question surprised, of course, the government of Norway, and they said it was a terrible idea. It was a bad idea. That was their initial response. We didn't ask twice. We said, well, we asked just if you wanted to collaborate with us. That was not a question of permission. So it came to their surprise that we went forward with the idea and actually went to New York and invited the world to Alta in 2013, a 2-year heads up for the Alta conference. And we were attacked afterwards, but we had then decided that we won't ask for a dime from the government. We would have to be prepared to try to use 2 years to try to raise the money and show that the indigenous peoples are able to actually do things on their own. They don't need the yes or no from the governments and so forth, so on. That meant that we went on a very sort of challenging path, but the thing was that during that, when we came with that invitation, the whole of the world responded constructively, especially the indigenous global community responded very constructively to that initiative. And we said that we will invite you there. We will only facilitate the actual framework, the indigenous government, the governing structures around the world, and the indigenous diplomacy has to come together and find a way to coordinate this work. And as we all know, indigenous peoples are no other than other people. We don't agree on a lot, but we do agree on some things, and we were able to actually to establish a process leading up to this conference that was really as bottom up as possible, because it was done region-wise and it was done respectfully. Nobody interfered with the other regions' way to organize themselves. It was left over to each and every one. And we worked together. We didn't establish any steering committee. We had this facilitating group that was more like keeping it all together, where everyone was involved. So that worked out well. I remember us sitting with representatives in New York and just sketching this process out on a small piece of paper, and it actually, in hindsight, worked just as we planned during a lunch break in New York. So sometimes it works when we all come together and we all just see the need to actually make a push. Fast forward, I do agree that, and I think many agree that we managed to run a process that got to take its time, and where we really, I mean, the different regions had all these different positions coming into the common negotiations on the outcome document in Alta, but hard negotiating work in Alta made and good preparations from all regions, and I thank them all for participating and contributing, made a very strong document, as you say, go way beyond the General Assembly World Conference outcome document. But yeah, I think there are many things coming together there that shows the strength and potential that we can all utilize if we just focus and do it. And I'm especially proud of the fact that we there was no government behind anything. There was no state behind any of this process, other than chipping in at some point, but on our terms. So that's what I think we all can be proud of. And the teams that were set up in New York, that was there for months and months and negotiated. I mean, everything just worked. But it was a big effort, and I think everybody sort of had wanted it to materialize into some more firm structures that could live on in a better way than it has. But I mean, things change, so I don't know what is the...
I think a little bit more context, because thank you again, Rune, for laying that all out, because not a lot of people know that, like the behind the scenes work. Mm-hmm. For a lot of people that are watching or watching afterwards, over 500 Indigenous people from all over the world came to Alta. It was such a representative meeting, like regionally balanced. Indigenous women, elders, youth, they were all represented. So it is high level of legitimacy, the meeting itself and the document that came out of Alta, the Alta outcome document. Also, and this is more of a subjective thing, it is not, well, no, I'm sorry, I'm sorry to say it differently. It is to a lot of Indigenous peoples, the World Conference. Like the World Conference was held by the United Nations, but for a lot of Indigenous peoples, the meeting in Alta was actually the World Conference. So just a little bit of context to give more meat, more taste to the behind the scenes story that Rune just now shared, because I think that a lot of people need to know that. Rune, one of the outcomes of the World Conference was, of course, like the enhanced participation process. A lot of people do not know that we had the World Conference outcome document, and then we had to lobby again for this enhanced participation process. A lot of people do not know that you were only one of the few that would have to like bend over backwards in New York to make an effort lobbying. That was in 2017. How, like that whole experience of 2017, what overarching sense did that give to you about how Indigenous peoples are or are not engaging in diplomacy?
Well, I think that whole process, I mean, it highlighted also some of the differences that are between the regions on how we look at various things. I mean, some regions have more institutionalized structures, and some have not, and there's always hard to give a strict definition on how such enhanced participation could be managed. Just say that I recognize that there are different points of departure here within the Indigenous community. So what I think is also I think there are many elements here. There was at that point also on the state side a sense of fatigue. Well, we had just finished. First, it was the declaration and the achievements there. Then it was the World Conference, and that took many years. And then we were into new negotiations that was challenging to all parties, and I sensed especially a fatigue from also the indigenous side. I mean, we don't have the personal power, we don't have the economical power. Negotiations are set up in New York, extremely expensive to even go there. I mean, we met 6 times. I traveled every month for half a year for 3-4 days, and people can't. Not everyone can support such negotiations, and in order to do that, you have to have a very strong and broad sense in the community that this is something that should be prioritized. And I understand that most indigenous peoples, even we on the Sámi side, have more than enough to do at home than to really push for that part. What disappointed me maybe most was that we were dealing with the UN, and the UN has very strict is the keeper of human rights and of international standards on indigenous peoples, and that the system itself was incapable of understanding that the system should be able to adopt rules that really levels the participation with the rights that we do have as self-determining peoples. That is maybe my biggest disappointment, that we couldn't have this discussion. That, come on, every single country in the world has signed on the United Nations Declarations on Indigenous Peoples, and free, prior, and informed consent with whom? How do we make sure that we actually talk to the people that we are supposed to protect with these regulations, and enhancing that and making the UN as the peoples of the world's body? That is the challenge, and that we couldn't get further in that discussion is most disappointing. Because yes, it's a ever returning challenge that, are you looking for secession? No, that's why we are here. There is a system in the UN to handle secession. There is a system to establish new states. History has shown since, the last 150 years, how many states haven't been created during that period with special procedures and recognition from the international community. So it's bullshit to say that there is no, that's not a black and white issue in that sense. The system for establishing a new state is there. So we are not advocating for that. We are advocating for a system that could protect peoples that don't want to establish separate states. And that dialogue, I feel, is what we are not getting through to the United Nations. We are there begging on our knees, sort of, to be protected from states, not to be one. And that's and to be confronted that we are advocating for breaking things up. No, we are just advocating for our own protection as peoples for the future. And that is, and if governments around the world keep holding that kind of rhetorics high and pushing that way of thinking, I think we're on the wrong track. That's more conflict inducing than necessary, because we are there to actually find protection and comfort.
Thank you, Rune, for laying that out. One thing that I know that you are have a very strong opinion about, and I'd like to pick your brain about, is about mandate. Mm-hmm. I see, just the way that I see it, I see my instructions for Indigenous diplomacy as a dance between developments at the international stage and the mandate from the representative institution. Sure. I see it, one informs the other. Where do you stand on that, like in terms of like firmness of a mandate?
I think that everyone that claims to negotiate on behalf of any given entity has to be able to document that they actually have the support and a mandate to do so. And then it sort of becomes a bit irrelevant whether you have the formal documents in place. I mean, so there's a little bit of a difference there. Just as an example, we appointed John Henriksson as the international representative of the Sámi Parliament of Norway to represent us in the UN process on the World Conference, and he didn't have we didn't have an access. We didn't have ECOSOC status, so we couldn't issue any access card or any UN passport for him. So he had to borrow one from Evgia. So he was there basically without an office, a physical office. He was there, but I mean, because he had a mandate and could document that he represented someone, I mean, you could bypass the system and be regarded as a true representative, regardless of your formal documents. And that's also why he was also appointed by the Secretary General as a co-facilitator for the negotiating process. I mean, he was appointed by the UN, but he didn't have a formal access document to even get into the building. so that's the paradox here. So we are still trying to confront that. But I think the most important thing is not whether you have to do it through an organization or an NGO. You have to stretch the system a bit just to get inside. As long as you have an unquestionable mandate from your people, you're fine. I mean, that's where you will get your voice heard, and people will see through, that.
Thank you so much, Rune. Like we're coming to the end of this segment. Anything that you really want to talk about that we did not discuss, but you really want to say or want people to think about?
Well, I think one thing that we all should think about when we work in Indigenous advocacy is that often we are ourselves our worst enemies. And that's the people are, we often discuss principles but then our neighbor becomes the president of something that we have created, and we don't like our neighbor. Okay, we shoot it down. So, I mean, that is also, I hear often that people criticize in our setting, in the Sámi community, some may criticize that Norwegian government or whichever government doesn't pay adequate respect to our president. Well, that all begins with the fact that we ourselves give that position the status that we wanted to have. We pay the position the respect, and then we have to tolerate that that maybe it is our neighbor that holds that position that we might not like personally, but we shouldn't attack the position because of that. That is to take it down on a very small level, but this is something that I think is universal and is a challenge. When we all really come together and put those things aside, and we identify the things that we should fight for as peoples, we have shown through the history, especially in the UN system, that we can succeed. And that's, I think we should never underestimate the strength that we have ourselves. We have always focus on the things that we don't have, but don't underestimate the things that we do have.
Thank you so much, Rune, for that final point. I think it's very relevant, mostly overlooked by a lot of Indigenous peoples. Thank you so much for highlighting that. Let me end by saying thank you so much, Summer Parliament of Norway, for like the efforts, the amount of effort that you have put into like the World Conference process, like doing all the logistical, the technical support, and yourself as well. Like a lot of, we always look at the people that are like the leadership, but it's also important to acknowledge the people that do hard work behind the scenes. So I would, in addition, of course, to for the president of the Sámi Parliament of Norway, I would like to very much thank you so much for your work, and looking forward to keep on working and talking to you. Thank you so much, Rune.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting.
All right, thank you. Thank you. I would also like to express my gratitude to Sámi Parliament in Norway and also to Rune. You know, the ALTA conference is it's overwhelming. And I think it's a very precious experience for a lot of Indigenous peoples who had participated in that meeting. As for, at that time, I was the co-chair of the Youth Caucus, and we had very difficult discussion in those 3 days, but I learned a lot, and also all these experiences are still very useful, I would say, for me until now, because I'm not in politics, and I was experiencing politics at that time already. So yeah, thank you for preparing me to be in the politics.